the adjacent booth, a young soldier, intense, very intense, looking at his monitor. There was nobody in front of him, and so I didn't know what was going on. I went through and I turned around. Well, they had behind the two of them a pillar that they had lined in glass, so I could see the reflection. And I was stunned by what I saw. But I went through, I turned around and took a picture of it. And you'll find it online when it is. And this soldier was playing online solitaire. I was stunned that a North Korean young soldier, in the minutes between people coming up, in an environment where you had foreigners would be playing online solitaire, card game. The other thing I want to do before turning this over to a Q&A is to talk a little bit about the coordination process and to answer a question before you ask. There were no messages that were passed from me, from the U.S. government, or any other government to the North Koreans. There were no messages given to me by the North Koreans explicitly to the U.S. government. Now, that having been said, I was very careful from the very beginning to coordinate with Ambassador Bosworth to ensure that the trip itself would not interfere with what he and the U.S. government and our allies were doing with regard to North Korea. I did that from the very beginning in April and checked with him periodically to ensure that this would not be a disruption. We went over to the White House, talked just in informational terms to members of the NSC. I talked with members of the State Department. I briefed the South Koreans before going in at the governmental level. I briefed the Chinese and the Japanese as well. Our process of coming out, even though this was a private visit, if you will, was to leave Pyongyang on the 24th, fly on Air Koryo directly to Beijing. That's the connection. Immediately got on a Korean airline to fly to Seoul. Got in a taxi and went to the U.S. Embassy and briefed the political section there for over an hour. We then had dinner with Ambassador Lee Sung-wak that evening to help the South Korean government, and had another breakfast meeting with another government official in the morning before we left. When I came back, I talked with Steve Bosworth by phone. I separately talked with Ambassador Sung Kim. I briefed an official from the Chinese embassy as well as the Japanese embassy. I talked with the South Korean embassy on 2 occasions, to include having lunch with Ambassador Khan yesterday on that. So we've been very forthright in sharing our information at the appropriate time, both with our U.S. and other governments, both in advance and afterwards. And we're now sharing with you, mostly to demystify what was done, what was said, and give you our impressions as you undoubtedly are looking to the main event, and that's Ambassador Bosworth, who is currently in Pyongyang, probably already had a short meeting when he arrived, and maybe even a dinner, and will begin what I believe to be the main conversation tomorrow. But the point is to give you a little bit of background of what we think will be the atmosphere and the focus by the North Koreans going into this discussion. So with that, Greg, let me turn it over to you to moderate any questions that may be.
Thank you, Ambassador Pritchard. Thank you, Nicole. Before we move on to the Q&A, I would like to remind you that we have coffee and soft drinks still available in the back. And we'll take the first question. Helen, please. Please remember to identify yourself and your media organization.
Yes, Helen Lee. I'm working for South Korean newspaper. If I recall correctly, I think you are the first person who anticipated that North Korea will not enter so-called third phase of the denuclearization of the peninsula last year, April, after you had been to North Korea. And I think your analysis and prediction at the time was really perfect. And as you anticipated, North Korea now they are denying, they are refusing to having a 6-5 talks again. So you mentioned that Mr. Bosworth's visit to Pyongyang will not make some kind of a breakthrough. So if this meeting is not so successful, I'm wondering how North Korea would like to react after that, and how the Obama administration will be reacting to the North Korea. They would like to have more pressure, or they would like to have a kind of a deny neglect or malign neglect policy.
Well, thanks very much. And as you point out, this will be my own analysis, my own speculation. I don't have any inside information on how the U.S. government will respond. But prior to going to North Korea, I had anticipated that the North Koreans would try to create a situation in which there were multiple meetings with Ambassador Boswell, that they would not, from a negotiating point of view, come into this meeting, have a discussion, and then commit to come back to six-party talks. For face-saving reasons, that they would want to at least 2 meetings, and if they could have their way, more. Now, after having been on this trip, it's my own view that the North Koreans would like to push this as far down the road as possible, maintaining a bilateral-only discussion with the United States. So what I don't know how it will play out is whether it will be a very strictly by the talking points, and I sincerely doubt that. Steve Bosworth is the very best person that could be leading the U.S. delegation to this. He has, as you know, extensive experience both diplomatically, having been an ambassador to multiple countries, having been our ambassador to South Korea, having been the executive director of the Korean Peninsula Energy Development Organization, at which time he negotiated practical protocols with North Korea. So he has a great deal of experience, and I think has the respect and latitude of the U.S. government to have a very serious discussion. The question becomes whether or not the North Koreans are going to enter into that subject in terms of the return to six-party talks and the denuclearization process. My own speculation is they're not going to want to have that discussion. They're going to want to try to force the discussion on the peace treaty and to force it into multiple occasions. And so you're correct. I don't expect a breakthrough. I don't expect that the North Koreans will agree to come back to six-party talks after this initial meeting. What I don't know is whether or not the U.S. will evaluate this in terms of, let's give it another shot. This is a negotiating posture by the North Koreans. One more attempt in terms of a bilateral contact after full consultation with their allies could very well lead to the North Koreans coming back. I don't know. That's the point we're going to have to, and I'm going to be looking at this as interestingly as you are to see what type of signaling comes out after the Bosworth trip. One of the first things I'm going to look for is what do the North Koreans say publicly in their official statements about the trip. I would anticipate very little. If they say too much, that may very well end the contact between them. So let me stop at that point.
Great. Nicole, next question, please.
Thank you for doing this. It's been very interesting. I have 2 questions. First of all, you spoke about the importance of economic development. Can you give us your personal insight into the saliency of this currency devaluation and if it has any connection with these upcoming bilaterals? And then, second of all, if you could just give us an overall view of how these talks are any different. Are they not? Is this what we've been doing all of these years, or is there some kind of difference?
If I can remember both of these. One, I'm not an economist, so I went to my vice president, Jim Lister, and asked about this, and I said, tell me about the revaluation. He said, there isn't one. There's a redenomination. Not that matters. But I think from what I've read, what I've heard, what I understand, the feeling that I get is the North Koreans, as part of this economic development, is what they want to do is to exert some more control over the system. I think it's gotten out of hand. The markets, we haven't talked about that. We didn't go to a market. I've been to the Tongil Street Market. That's an amazing place.